Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Good morning. I am George Socha, Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness at Reveal. This is eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. We are broadcasting live today from the last day now of Legal Week in New York, and my guest now is Blanchard of T-Mobile.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So before we get into our topic, you want to tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm the head of Discovery and Information Governance at T-Mobile. We call us our DIG team because we dig for data. And I've been there about 6.5 years. I've got a team of 6 people who help do 2 sides. One is, typical discovery, responding to government requests, litigations, although we try to be more proactive and put, kind of workflows around things. And the other side of my team is information governance. So we hold the records retention schedule is owned by our team, and we work with IT and security and the business to kind of manage data as well.
So this is the last day of the conference. You've probably been to too many booths, seen too many demos, heard too many pitches. What's your takeaway?
Yeah, one, it's great to be back in person, obviously, and just, see people and the energy of the conference and things like that. And, there's some great progress that's been made in the couple of years since we've all, been in person. But I think there's still some, I think we're going to see some exciting changes to technology in the next couple of years as well.
What have you been looking for? And what have you found or not found?
Yeah, I think our challenge is, our biggest pain point is collaboration tools, right? Especially with COVID, we've seen such an increase in the use of, the messaging tools and whiteboarding apps and things like that just...
So Slack and Zoom and Teams and all of that?
Yep. And then, Miro and our online whiteboarding tools. So, not just in the conference anymore. And they still... fit neatly within, the kind of 4 squares of a document. So,
yes, yeah.
And I think there's a lot of open questions around how do we produce things, how do we collect them, and things like that as well.
What have you seen or not seen when it comes to those that content?
Yeah, I think obviously it's on people's mind, which is great because I think a few years ago it wasn't even being talked about, right? So it definitely is sort of the buzzword. I think there's still questions because we don't even know how we have to produce this stuff, right? It's, with an email, there's a lot of, you're producing the whole email chain, you're producing attachments, there's a lot of clarity around, what metadata for the most part you're producing. But with collaboration tools, what is a document?
Right.
Like, is it the entire channel or the entire Teams workspace? Is it, a 24-hour period? Is it some comment? Do we have to go get links? Do we have to get, make sure we're producing emojis and everything? So I think there's a lot of questions. And so I think some of that's driving, the companies aren't really sure what they're working towards on that side. But definitely we are past the point of, an Excel file to look at text messages or collaboration tools, right? There's been a lot of great work in terms of visualizing the messages as you would see them if you were in the native application.
So if I am interpreting what you're saying correctly, we now understand we need to get at and work with this data.
Yeah.
We're getting a start when it comes to tools to gather, allow us to evaluate and present and use this data, but there's a ways to go still.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's both a ways to go in terms of the technology itself, but then also the rules around it and sort of standards of production and things like that as well. So definitely on the same page on that.
So if you could, I'll take and slightly adapt a question that I frequently ask on these episodes. Let's assume the impossible. Let's assume that you could have the solution of your dreams, that there were no financial barriers, that the software could be developed instantly, which of course we know is not possible.
Right?
It doesn't happen that way.
It doesn't?
And that it could function in any way you could imagine, however you wanted. What would your dream solution to all of this look like?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great question. I mean, I think we want to see it the way that it presents, within the application itself. So I think it's really critical, because so much of these is, if you're looking at an email, most of the information's in there. But if you just look at a single Slack message or a single text message, they're short, they're quick. And so you really need the context to understand that. And what I would love is the flexibility to change the time period I'm looking at. So often right now we're sort of, we're getting 24-hour chunks because it's better than the entire channel of years and years and years.
Yep.
But what I would love would be the flexibility, just to be able to, scroll up further if I need to, and scroll down if I don't need to, and then really sort of have a lot more flexibility within the tool to identify what's responsive and get more context if I need to. Because there's just, the way people are using it, sometimes it is just a quick, 3 or 4 message thing, and that's all contained. And other times they're picking up conversations from 6 months beforehand, and you need that ability to, go back and find those and things like that.
So you'd like to be able to scale the time to whatever period makes sense for your purposes. I assume as well, if you're looking at a 6-month period, you want something that lets you cherry pick those messages you're likely to care about. You don't want, especially with active communicators, all 6 months of content just showing up.
Absolutely.
Show up once, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, what you see in the channels, again, unlike email where it was, things are mostly contained to a few subjects, what you see in the channels is they're going back and forth about different things. And so what we don't want to get in a scenario of is having to produce a lot of non-responsive materials, which can, have privacy concerns. It can have, business sensitivity concerns that aren't relevant to the actual issues in a particular litigation. So you're faced with either redacting all of those, or so having that flexibility to be able to, kind of pick and choose what you're producing, subject to your obligations, but also you're negotiating with the other side what it's going to look like. And so that having that flexibility, so you're adapting it based on the needs of your case, is really critical.
My guess is that you're not just dealing with situations where you have 27 messages to read.
Absolutely not.
Which then makes me think your ideal platform probably wants some way of allowing you to find the specific messages you're looking for.
Definitely.
How would you like it to be able to do that?
Yeah, and in all the ways we're used to, right? Having AI, applied to it, having different filters around the dates and who's participating, right? Being able to narrow to those direct messages versus messages in channels and things like that. And also being able to deduplicate, right? I think that's a challenge right now. Is if you're pulling certain types of collaboration tools, trying to deduplicate that across custodians can be really hard. And so being able to change some of those things is absolutely important.
How about TAR for short messages?
Yeah.
Have you tried to do short messages in TAR?
We haven't, because the community, again, they're so designed to longer documents and things like that, right? So I have not seen a good solution. That would be another thing that would be absolutely ideal, as a way to really kind of dig into that and see the analytics around it, like who's communicating with who, and are they shifting from direct messages to channels and things like that,
and maybe
as well.
direct content to more circuitous content as well.
Absolutely.
Things like that.
Yeah And I think the other piece too, what you're seeing in the collaboration tools, is recordings and things like that, right? So how do you navigate finding the relevant kind of recorded messages that without
what do you do with the sound? What do you do with the video?
Absolutely.
How do you
then
find
how to produce
something?
it.
And how to produce it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it sounds like there would, in this ideal solution, you would have the technology to approach these various pieces in many different ways, but it wouldn't just be technology. There would also be standards, so that you could easily agree upon everything from the form of production or forms of production back to the beginning of what to preserve and what's acceptable in terms of preservation methods.
Absolutely. Well, and that's a big piece that you mentioned is right now, I mean, many companies that are using these collaboration tools, you're producing millions of messages a day. Now they're short, like it's not a
But it's
ton
still
of
millions.
but it's still millions. And so how do we preserve, either because there's a legal hold or because we've got a retention obligation? And they're definitely, I mean, a lot of those communications are not going to be true records that have to, right? But there can be information in there that does have to be preserved. And I don't want to put millions of messages a day under hold
because you've got one message in there that needs to be
exactly
preserved. Right.
So, and review is an issue, right? Again, like it's great to have the flexibility of how do I, being able to go back those 6 months, like I was talking about, but how do you review it in a way that's efficient and you're not, having multiple reviewers making different calls and things like that as well. So I think there's a lot of pieces.
So I'll throw in one more aspect to this, which I'm sure you are dealing with. I doubt that you're only using one collaboration platform.
Right.
I bet people are hopping from platform to platform, and yet it's one communication, one thread of communication, but spanning platforms. How would you like to see that addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and to be able, again, the visualization of like how they are jumping from place to place. Or you can have scenarios where you've got a meeting going on, the meeting's being recorded or there's notes being taken. And also as they're doing it, they're on Lucid, right? They're on virtual whiteboards and things like that. So how do you link all of those things together so that you're getting that, complete picture? And then how do you also educate your employees about maybe we don't need to record these meetings. Maybe we don't need to, we're thinking about how we're, kind of preserving that information or what information needs to be kept. So
you've added a whole additional layer here of the development of policies, the implementation of policies, the policing of those policies, how you can go into the data and try to assess whether people are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing and not doing what they're not supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. And so much of that is education, right? I mean, the vast majority of employees are not doing anything nefarious, right? They just, they're like, I need to do X, Y, and Z for my business. How do I do that to help the business be successful? And these tools help them be successful. And so you absolutely need to understand the business and then educate them, because all of the employees I talk to, both current life and prior life, when you explain to them why it is that it matters where they're storing things or how they're storing things, they get it. And but without that, they don't live in this world of discovery.
Someone has to explain it to them, right? Because you're right. Why in the world would they know anything about what we do?
Absolutely.
Well, Ellen, thank you so much for stopping by. I know it's the end of a very busy, very active conference. I'm glad you were able to stop and take the time to talk with us today.
Absolutely. Well, this was a ton of fun. Thanks for having me on and listening to my ideas. So ideal world. I can't wait to see what we've got next year.
There we go. So our guest in this brief episode was Ellen Blanchard from T-Mobile. I'm George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.